Thank you very much. It's such a pleasure to be here today. Let me start with a correction, which is we wouldn't be here without the contribution of many, many people. And I want to thank them all for all the work they have put in the development of this school. I faced some dilemmas. I faced some dilemmas in preparing for this talk. One was that I had no time to prepare it, and another that I usually wiggle it in general audiences because they believe that I am a knowledgeable economist and I can fake it. But in this audience, I cannot. This is an audience of experts. So I solved my two problems by doing the following. 15 or 3 weeks ago, I was in Georgetown University speaking to a general audience, and I presented double what I will present today. There was a last part on Catalonia, which will not be here, but I presented the European crisis, a view from the south. My trick today is to present to you what I presented in Georgetown, and so you will see how somebody implicated in policy in Europe presents European issues to American general audiences. Of course, if I had prepared specifically for you, I would have made a very serious and technical contribution. That said, let me begin. And I will divide the talk in two parts. One, I will speak generalities about Europe and the European crisis, and then I will talk about Spain. That's the view from the south. I am not speaking of the south as a concept that goes from Cyprus to Portugal, but simply from one place in the south, and so I will try to describe how I describe to the Americans our problems. The crisis in Europe has many aspects in common with the crisis in the United States, for example. All those are pretty well-known aspects. But what's distinctive about the European crisis, especially if you look at it from the United States, is that it is a sovereign debt crisis. And it is a sovereign debt crisis, among other reasons, because of the euro, which is a currency without a sovereign. Some time ago, I found a newspaper interview with myself from the year 91 or 92, in which, very sure of myself, I was saying that we will not see the euro. That was at the beginning of the talk about the euro, and I said that we will not see such a contraption, not because it was good or wasn't good, but because there was no sovereign, and this has not been seen, a currency without a sovereign. Okay, I was wrong, and out of that I learned that there is something called political commitment that can have lots of force, even against something so momentous as economic logic. In that sense, is why I say that the euro was a project driven more by political commitment than by economic logic. And one question that one can put is what will eventually prevail? will prevail the political commitment, and that will ensure the long-term permanency of the euro, or the economic logic that may point towards its disintegration. So let me give you the case for political commitment, and let me say that I still believe that political commitment will prevail. The first is purely political. I think the euro is the big project of Europe, Europe which is getting smaller, smaller in the world. I believe that by year, you put the date because I will be wrong on the date, but somewhere in the 21st century, Europe will be in the world like Switzerland is in Europe. In terms of magnitude. So Switzerland in Europe counts a lot, and it counts a lot because it has a number of assets. If Europe has to count in the world, at the very least, it has to be an economically integrated area, and in particular, the project has been to start with the euro. The failure of the euro will be a devastating blow. Therefore, my belief is that the political commitment continues in these European elites. It's a vague expression, but you understand what I mean. In this line, an interpretation of what's happening in the Eurozone is that in a rougher way that it could have been anticipated, what's happening is what had to happen, is what the designers planned that it should happen. Faced with the reality of a common currency, faced with the commitment to make the currency to work, will find a way to push through institutions and reforms and whatever is necessary to bring economic consistency to the contraption. Yes, to do that in the context of the current crisis, that was not anticipated, but it was in the script. In this development, there are some things which are clear successes, and perhaps the more important is the European Central Bank. If the European Central Bank had been a failure or a problem, probably the euro would be in danger. But it has not. It's an institution that has been gaining prestige. And then there is the reversibility issue. There are probably many people in Europe that think, what an idiocy to have made the euro, or what an idiocy to have entered the euro, but that does not mean that the cost of living be very high. For example, when a business may complain currently, you will hear many complaining in the south, in Spain, for example, in Catalonia, that they face rates of interest much higher than the rates of interest that a similar business faces in Germany, and complains bitterly, perhaps bitterly, that this is a consequence of the euro. Well, the question to put to them, and they know perfectly the answer, is: do you really believe that if we leave the euro, you will get credit in better terms than now? Obviously not. So now we are in the euro, and the challenge is to make that work. In summary, I don't think the undoing of the euro is by no means imminent. Now I give the case for economic logic, that is to say, for the economic forces to unravel the whole thing. That's well known. The economic governance of the euro is too weak for the magnitude of the crisis. We are engaged in a policy of doing at all times whatever is minimally necessary for dodging out of current difficulties, but no more. And that, you know, there could be accidents. You see constantly examples, although, as I will say in a moment, the accidents are also vaccines. If they don't kill you, they make you more resistant for the next situation. The banking union is happening, but it will not end up being a real banking union. We are not going to see in the short round or in the medium round common deposit insurance, for example. That's too much out of the way. And finally, I would say that the current fiscal policies of Europe are too dominated by the moral hazard argument, and that leads to front-loaded policies. Any notion of relaxing anything is seen as an incentive to slackening off. In that sense, the pre-Monti Berlusconi moves in Italy were very damaging because they gave credence to this fear, but I think this fear is at this point excessive. And it breeds misunderstandings, resentment in the south, etc. It's not healthy, this extreme dominance of this argument. The long-run threat, my impression, as I say, oops. Okay. The long-run threat is, do I see any long-run threat to the euro based on economic logic? Well, I think only one, which is that there will be a Europe that in the mid-long term will be growing, but there will be two Europes, one Europe growing and one Europe stagnant. I don't know how this could happen, or if it I don't know how if it happened, that will blow the euro, but I don't see that this could go on in the long run. I could imagine that a Europe uniformly like Japan could last for very long. But the dualization is for me harder to imagine in the long run, not in the short run. I would imagine too that to avoid this scenario, this possible scenario, I will be surprised if to guarantee against this scenario. We could do that without any kind of transfer union. I am not saying that this is theoretically impossible. It may be possible, but the most likely is that some degree of mutualization will be necessary. Currently, there are no euro bonds, there are no euro pensions, there is no euro deposit insurance, or there is no euro insurance for our for unemployment, for example. Now, I would think that if the last big project of Europe was the common currency, and this was a strategy of making yet another strategy of creating an economic reality which should induce political moves, My impression is that we have gotten to the point where this has to be reversed. What now, the next big move in Europe should be a political move to make possible further economic developments. And to that effect, let me point out that, remember, I talked about this in the United States. Remember that it was, as it is now fashionable to point out, that it was in 1790 when Alexander Hamilton, the first Secretary of Finance of the United States, mutualized the debt of the states, adopted the debt of the war debt of the states. That is frequently mentioned as pointing out that this is the direction in which Europe sooner or later will have to go. But let me point out that if that was true in 1790, he was the first finance minister of the first government of the United States with an elected president from 1789. So before mutualizing the debt, there was in the United States a president elected by in fact, direct vote, or said another way, there was a very strong political legitimacy behind the mutualization move. And it is my impression that the next big project in Europe is going to be an elected president, indirect or direct. Personally, I will prefer direct, but indirect is not impossible. Anyhow, I skip over this. This is the usual list of problems in the South. 2 days after 2 months after I was in the United States, all this looks a bit better. But anyhow, I moved to Spain. The example from the South. I should go fast because I'm taking too much of my time. The difficulties that we are facing. Some of you may have lived them. If you are recent alumni, some of the alumni from the first cohorts may not have lived those difficulties. Recession, private indebtedness. The consequence is that neither private demand nor public demand growth forces. It is hard to tell the public that they did not behave properly when they were spending a lot during the time of the bubble. And then number two, tell them, and you know what, now you should continue spending. The financial restructuring is not yet over, and there is a substantial issue of availability of credit. Mortgage and foreclosure are a problem. This is, we could say very sketchily, that Spain is a country well adapted to very high levels of unemployment. I don't know why, many theories, but experience says that it can live with higher levels of unemployment. I'm not sure if that is true for mortgages, foreclosures of mortgages and for evictions. And take into account that this is also a country of property owners. So this is potentially an issue that touches a big segment of the population, although quantitatively it's just smaller than unemployment, and it also, through mortgages, touches the heart of the financial simply. Reforms in the public sector, many have been done, but there are some still pending. For example, the health system. Good favorable factors. Well, the one that now is most noticed is this one. For the first time in many in many, many years. The external balance of Spain is positive, and that's not only for cyclical reasons. It's not only because imports have fallen, but also because they have exports have increased. But among the favorable factors, first one, I should be careful in this because politically I don't like that the central government has an absolute majority of the political color that it has at this point. In fact, I don't like it at all. But the fact in itself is a good fact because it's definitely a favorable factor in comparison, for example, with Italy. Perhaps real estate values have bottomed up. I don't know, perhaps not. There are probably people more expert than me. The third factor is very important, and it fits with what I have mentioned before, which is that the economy is gaining competitiveness. I would say for two reasons. In the sustained performance of exports, for example, there are two factors. One, there is an internal devaluation going on, and that's very palpable. It's palpable for example, in important sectors like the automation sectors, where one must say the unions have been very cooperative. The unions, on the one hand, they are demonstrating in the streets every day. On the other, when they negotiate firm by firm and sector by sector, etc., they are being quite reasonable. Not all unions, but the mainstream unions, and in fact they are collaborating with the process of internal devaluation. And second, because not everything during the bubble was a party. You may remember a front cover of The Economist that said the party is over. And it's true, there was a big party, but not all was a party. Many businesses renovated their installations, their equipment. There were lots of imports of capital goods, of machinery, and all that is showing up. And to the point that there is even a dream, probably an impossible dream, but there is even a dream of a German-style export-led recovery and growth, because that's what's working at this point. And that was particularly significant to point out in the United States about the infrastructures. There were many infrastructures that were built and were not necessary. Well, the fact that they are now built, it's better to take advantage of them. And besides, we also learn to build infrastructures. For example, when one goes through the airports of New York or Washington, one deduces, you can live and progress with less shining airports than the ones we have in Spain. So that's a minus for what we did. Second, those guys sooner or later would like to have decent airports, and we can build decent airports. But I think I will finish here. There is a last which is what the European Commission said about the Spanish macroeconomical imbalances. It's all very sensible and couched in the usual careful language. So I leave it here, and I make an appointment with you 5 years from now, and somebody should be able to give you more cheerful account. There were some, I was transmitting some of the questions you have, some of you have asked. I have here 12 questions. I really cannot answer the 12 questions. There is one which says that the conference organized by the IMF in April, I am reading, George Akerlof used the following metaphor to describe the helplessness that he and other eminent economists feel towards the continuing Great Recession. It's as if a cat had climbed this huge tree. The cat, of course, is the huge crisis. My view is, oh my God, the cat is going to fall and I don't know what to do. Joseph Stiglitz took up the metaphor and says there is no good economic theory that explains why the cat is still up there. Has there been some way that the building of economic theory has been erroneous, or is the economy to some extent simply unknowable? I don't know. What implications do these kinds of statements have on the teaching of economic theory? I find the whole statement a bit mild because I thought I was dealing with a tiger, not a cat, and I would settle for knowing how to transform a tiger into a cat. And I don't know that, but at any rate, for the teaching of economics, etc., I think that we should learn humility. And if I should say something more, I will say for a theories that there are no innocent hypotheses. If to make something work, you need to make 8 hypotheses, probably each one of them is important and deserves to be looked at carefully, because if the result depends on that hypothesis, there can be some day where something doesn't go because of that hypothesis. Another question is on what are the long-run perspectives. The long-run perspectives, I think are good. I am confident that this future of Europe dualize between the North and the South is not the future of Europe. And I also think that probably, that's not sure, this issue of serious political developments in Europe may happen. I may mention that in theory, Germany is not opposed to further political unification moves, even to the elections of presidents by direct or indirect vote. But we will see. My impression is that Germany says that because it knows that France is even more is really opposed. The day that France is in favor, we'll see what's the position of Germany. But I think we should progress in this direction, and there will be progress in this direction. And I stop here. Thank you very much.